Marcus Jenkins spent years invisible, scrubbing floors in Pierce Tower while the world treated him like he didn't exist. Jonathan Pierce, the billionaire CEO, seemed untouchable, dismissive, self-absorbed, and blind to the courage of those beneath him. But when Marcus risked his life to save Pierce from a rooftop disaster, everything changed in an instant. And just wait until you see how that single act of bravery turned the tables, giving Marcus the recognition, respect, and justice he truly deserved. Marcus Jenkins pushed his mop across the polished marble floor of the Pierce Tower, the high-rise that scraped the clouds and seemed to mock the people below with its gleaming glass walls. Every sweep of the mop reflected the harsh fluorescent lights above, but no matter how much he polished, it never seemed enough. The building was immaculate, yet Marcus felt a bitter irony gnawing at him. He was responsible for the shine, the perfection, yet no one ever noticed him. To the executives rushing past, he was a shadow, a background figure who existed only to maintain appearances. Today, like every day, he moved in silence, stepping around sleek leather chairs, expensive potted plants, and the sound of heels clicking across the lobby, a rhythm that reminded him how far the world had placed him from people like Jonathan Pierce, the billionaire CEO who lived at the top of this vertical kingdom. He wiped a smudge from the floor, his fingers stiff in the cold, recycled air of the lobby, and overheard fragments of conversations floating down from the mezzanine. Bankers laughed at deals that Marcus couldn't even imagine. Executives whispered about the latest shake-ups in the company, how Pierce had let go of some employees with a single email, no warning, no second thought. Their voices carried an almost casual cruelty, as if human lives were numbers to be shuffled around on a spreadsheet. Marcus felt the anger rise inside him, not at Pierce himself necessarily, but at the system that allowed such detachment. A system where loyalty and hard work counted for nothing unless your name was on a business card with gold trim. He glanced at the elevator banks and saw the security guards, tall men in dark suits with earpieces, their eyes scanning the crowd with the kind of authority that made ordinary people shrink back. Marcus had learned early on not to meet their gaze. One of them barked, "Move it, Jenkins!" And Marcus gritted his teeth, forcing a polite nod as he continued his work. Every command, every dismissive glance, was a reminder of the invisible hierarchy he navigated daily. He worked tirelessly, from the break of dawn until the evening lights flickered on. Yet to most of the building's residents, he was nothing more than a fixture, a janitor who cleaned up after their lives while remaining unseen. Marcus's mind wandered as he scrubbed at a stubborn stain, thinking about his own life, the small apartment in Queens that he returned to each night, the rent that consumed almost everything he earned, the emails from job recruiters that never went anywhere, the dreams that felt as distant as the penthouse windows above. He had talent, ambition, ideas, but the world had a way of telling him that none of it mattered unless he started at the top, with connections he could never hope to have. Anger coiled inside him, a slow burn that pulsed with each step he took across the marble. Not rage directed at any single person, but a sharp, clear sense of injustice, a recognition that the world he lived in rewarded the wrong things and overlooked the right ones. As he pushed the mop in long, measured strokes, Marcus allowed himself a moment of bitter reflection. He could see the life of privilege above him, the executives laughing over champagne, Pierce's face in every news article, smiling confidently as if the world belonged to him by right. And yet, Marcus thought, it didn't have to be this way. One day, maybe, things could change. Maybe the invisible people, people like him, could show the world that courage, intelligence, and integrity mattered just as much as a fancy title or a corner office. For now, though, all Marcus had was the rhythm of his mop and the swell of anger at a system that treated him as disposable. The lobby gleamed, the lights shone bright, and life went on around him, indifferent to the man who kept it polished. But deep inside, a spark had lit, a spark that refused to be ignored, a quiet fire that whispered Marcus wouldn't stay invisible forever. And somewhere, high above, Jonathan Pierce remained blissfully unaware of the man who walked among him, silently plotting a life that would one day defy all the rules of this world. The late evening air was crisp, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Marcus Jenkins was finishing his last rounds when a sharp, piercing scream cut through the quiet hum of the office building. It was a sound so urgent and raw that it froze him mid-step. His mop paused in the middle of the lobby floor. Without thinking, he ran toward the elevators, his heart hammering, adrenaline flooding his veins. Something was wrong, something terrible, and he could feel it in every fiber of his body. He took the stairs two at a time, his boots clattering against the concrete, echoing up the shaft. As he reached the rooftop terrace, the city lights stretched in a glittering panorama below, oblivious to the drama unfolding above. And then he saw him, Jonathan Pierce, the billionaire whose life seemed untouchable, dangling dangerously over the edge of the terrace, his hand gripping the railing that trembled under the weight of his body. The expensive suit he always wore, perfectly tailored and meticulously pressed, was torn in the scramble, and his face was pale, eyes wide with a raw, unshielded terror Marcus had never seen before. The crowd below had gathered like a murmuring sea of shadows, frozen in panic, unsure whether to shout, call for help, or just watch. Marcus didn't pause to think about the height, the risk, or the consequences. His instincts took over, fueled by a mixture of fear and clarity. He lunged forward, grabbing Pierce's arm with a strength he didn't know he possessed. The railing groaned ominously, threatening to give way entirely, but Marcus's grip was steady, unwavering. He heaved with every ounce of his body, pulling Pierce away from the brink just as the metal railing buckled under pressure, sending a shiver of panic through everyone who watched. When Marcus finally dragged Pierce back onto solid ground, gasping for air, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause, their relief tangible in the electric air. But Pierce barely registered it. He stood there, straightening his torn jacket, his expression hardening instead of softening. Marcus's chest heaved, his arms trembling from the effort, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. His heart pounded in a rhythm that demanded recognition, acknowledgment, something to affirm that what he had done mattered. But Pierce's eyes didn't hold gratitude. They were sharp, cold, almost dismissive, like Marcus was an inconvenience he had been forced to endure rather than a person who had risked everything to save him. A bitter sting cut through Marcus, not at the danger he had faced, but at the invisibility of his sacrifice. He had jumped, without hesitation, into a moment that could have cost him his life. And for what? For a man who saw him only as a janitor, someone beneath notice, someone whose courage was irrelevant. Marcus felt the weight of the injustice pressing down on him. He had been willing to put everything on the line, yet the person he saved seemed incapable of seeing him as more than a background figure in a story that belonged to someone else. His hands, still shaking, lowered to his sides, and he let out a long breath, the sound loud in the tense night air. Around him, people were still whispering, pointing, shaking their heads in disbelief, but Marcus barely noticed. All that mattered was the emptiness in Pierce's eyes, a mirror of the world he had fought against for so long. The city sprawled below, bright and unyielding, indifferent to the drama on the rooftop. Marcus stood there, feeling the pulse of his own life and the weight of the risk he had taken. The world had demanded courage from him, yet refused to honor it. He could see, in that fleeting moment, the harsh truth he had long carried. Being brave was no guarantee of recognition, and selflessness often met with cold indifference. And yet, deep inside, amidst the bitterness, there was a spark that refused to dim. Marcus clenched his fists and drew in a steadying breath. The sting of injustice was sharp, but it was also a reminder. His courage existed regardless of who noticed it. He had acted when it mattered, and that was something no one could ever take away. Even if Jonathan Pierce didn't see it now, Marcus knew that life had a way of changing in an instant, and perhaps one day the world would have to reckon with the strength he carried silently every day in places where no one thought to look. Marcus Jenkins stepped into the sleek confines of Jonathan Pierce's office, a space that seemed to float above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing a view of Manhattan's glittering skyline. The room smelled faintly of leather and expensive wood polish, the kind of luxury that Marcus had only glimpsed through the corridors he cleaned. Pierce sat behind a massive desk, his suit still slightly rumpled from the earlier rooftop incident, his face showing faint traces of the panic that Marcus had witnessed. The invitation to this office came under the guise of formal thanks, yet Marcus's instincts whispered that this encounter would be more complicated than any token acknowledgement. Marcus had expected the usual gestures, a polite handshake, a few words of thanks, perhaps even a tip to smooth over the risk he had taken. He had braced himself for the world to remain unchanged, for his actions to be seen but not recognized, acknowledged but ultimately irrelevant. And yet, as he stepped closer, he noticed something different in Pierce's eyes, a flicker of curiosity, an awareness that went beyond mere gratitude. Pierce was watching him, studying him, not with the casual detachment of someone accustomed to being served, but with the attention of a man trying to understand what he had just witnessed. "You saved my life," Pierce said, his voice low and measured, carrying a weight that made Marcus pause. The words themselves were simple, yet they held an authority and sincerity Marcus had rarely encountered. "I need people I can trust, people who act when it matters." There was no condescension, no hint of obligation in Pierce's tone, only recognition. Marcus felt a flicker of something he had longed for but rarely experienced: hope. Maybe this was the moment when the world, or at least this part of it, would finally see him as more than a janitor, more than someone who existed in the background. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. His heart pounded with a mixture of disbelief and cautious optimism. Every day he had worked tirelessly, polishing floors, sweeping corridors, maintaining the order of a world that largely ignored him. And yet, here was the billionaire himself, speaking words that seemed to bridge the gap between their two very different lives. For the first time, Marcus felt that courage and integrity could be noticed, even valued, in a world that often overlooked those qualities. Pierce's gaze held him for a long moment, as if weighing not just what had happened on the rooftop, but the character he had glimpsed in Marcus, the calm under pressure, the unwavering courage, the presence of mind that had turned a moment of potential disaster into safety. Then, in a gesture that stunned Marcus, Pierce reached beneath his desk and pulled out a company folder. The leather was smooth, the embossing crisp, and Marcus realized with a start that the contents were more than routine paperwork. They represented opportunity, trust, and responsibility in a way he had never imagined. "I want you to become my partner," Pierce said, sliding the folder across the desk. The words hit Marcus like a tidal wave, a shock that left him momentarily paralyzed. The office, the city beyond the windows, the hum of the elevators, they all seemed to fade, leaving only the improbable possibility that his life could change in a single instant. Hope surged through him, stronger than it had in years, illuminating a path that had previously seemed impossible. Marcus reached for the folder, his hands trembling slightly, a mix of disbelief and anticipation coursing through him. This was no token of thanks, no fleeting recognition. It was a vote of confidence, a validation of everything he had carried quietly through years of work and invisible service. In that moment, Marcus understood that courage, integrity, and a willingness to act in the face of danger could reshape not only his life, but the world around him. And as he looked at Pierce, he realized that sometimes the most profound changes begin with a single act and the courage to step forward when it matters most. Marcus Jenkins entered the boardroom of Pierce Tower with a sense of calm authority he had never experienced before. The room, expansive and lined with polished oak and glass, had once felt like a distant, intimidating stage, a place reserved for people whose names carried weight in the city. Now, Marcus sat at the head of the table, shoulder to shoulder with Jonathan Pierce, the man whose life he had saved months earlier. The transformation was more than symbolic. It was proof that courage, integrity, and quiet perseverance could overturn expectations and redefine a person's place in the world. Pierce, once aloof and dismissive, now treated Marcus with genuine respect. The billionaire listened carefully as Marcus outlined strategies and shared insights drawn from years of observing human behavior, problem-solving, and managing under pressure, even if that experience had come in the form of cleaning schedules and building operations. The boardroom, once a space that had seemed intimidating and unapproachable, had become a platform for Marcus's voice. He spoke with clarity, with conviction, and with a sense of purpose that inspired those around him. Employees who had once walked past Marcus without a glance now sought his advice. They admired not only the audacity of the man who had risen from the shadows of the corridors to influence major decisions, but also the intelligence, thoughtfulness, and moral clarity he brought to every conversation. Where there had been whispers of doubt and subtle condescension, there was now curiosity, collaboration, and respect. Marcus's ideas reshaped company policies, focusing on inclusion, efficiency, and ethical leadership. His perspective, grounded in years of working unseen, gave him insights that no executive could replicate. Outside the walls of Pierce Tower, the city watched with fascination. Stories of the janitor who had risked his life for a billionaire and was then named a partner spread quickly. Newspapers and social media celebrated the improbable rise of Marcus Jenkins, a man recognized not for his wealth, not for connections or titles, but for his courage, intelligence, and unwavering character. People in offices, cafes, and subways paused to reflect. A single act of bravery, when paired with integrity and perseverance, could alter the course of a life. Marcus had become an emblem of possibility, a living reminder that the value of a person cannot be measured by their occupation or their place in the hierarchy. Marcus himself reflected quietly on the journey that had brought him here. From the endless nights scrubbing floors, to the terrifying rooftop incident, to the tense conversations in Pierce's office, he had faced moments of invisibility, doubt, and injustice. Each step, each challenge, had prepared him for this moment, not just the material rewards, though they were significant, but the restoration of dignity, the breaking of invisible barriers, and the affirmation of his worth. The triumph was complete because it touched the core of what Marcus valued most: recognition for his character, courage, and the unwavering choice to do what was right. In the boardroom, Marcus looked out over his colleagues and saw a reflection of the change he had helped bring about. Pierce listened intently. Employees debated and contributed ideas, and the energy in the room was one of collaboration rather than hierarchy. Marcus realized that leadership was not about titles, offices, or wealth. It was about vision, integrity, and the ability to inspire others. As the city lights shimmered against the glass walls of Pierce Tower, Marcus Jenkins understood something fundamental. The world often underestimates those it overlooks, yet true character and courage can shift the balance in ways no one expects. In a single moment of bravery, he had not only saved a life, but transformed his own, proving that dignity, respect, and opportunity could be claimed by anyone willing to stand firm when it mattered most. His journey from janitor to partner was more than a personal victory. It was a story of hope, inspiration, and the unshakable truth that integrity has the power to change the world.